It's one of the most important airplanes ever built. The Douglas DC-3. A design so ahead of its time, it turned commercial air travel into a real business. A machine so reliable, it flew through both war and peace. And a legacy so strong, some are still flying it nearly 90 years later. This is more than a history lesson. This is a journey through time and across continents. In this four-part series, we explore the complete story of the DC-3. From its origin in the 1930s to its game-changing role in commercial aviation, its service in World War II, and its long afterlife as a cargo hauler, bush plane, and basically, a flying legend. But we're not just telling the story, we're flying it. Throughout this series, we'll recreate one of the most ambitious DC-3 routes of World War II, the Transatlantic crossing from North America to Europe, following the same path flown by Allied crews ferrying aircraft to the front. Using Microsoft Flight Simulator, we'll retrace that journey step by step. From Manassas Airport to Montreal, today, then to Goose Bay, and onward to Narsarsuaq, followed by Reykjavik, and then to Prestwick, and finally, Duxford. Welcome to the cockpit. Welcome to the legacy. This is DC-3, the plane that defined the golden age of flying. This is part 1, and we will continue with the story during cruise.
Number 5247, taxi left Juliet, cross to right, and then you can monitor the tower on 123.9. Good day.
Cross Juliet, cross to right, monitor down, 47.
Airplane 007 Heavy, amend your instructions. Taxi via Juliet, cross to right.
Taxi via Juliet, cross to right, airport 007.
Delta 172 Heavy, monitor tower on 123.9. Have a good night.
Good night, 3.9, that's 172. Delta 1394, approaching spot 11, actually. Delta 1394, band 27 left, taxi via Foxtrot, hold short of 27 right. Foxtrot, short of 27 right, Delta 1394. Ground Endeavor 5352, 5 south with Sierra.
Endeavor 5352, ground 9 left Mike 2, taxi via Lima to Lima 1.
Lima to Lima 1, 9 left Mike 2, Endeavor 5352.
Delta 2636, you're next. You can monitor on 12385.
12385, Delta 2636.
Citation 780 Juliet Sierra, up to tower, wind 32012, gust 21.
Runway 27 left, 7 takeoff. Clear takeoff, runway 27 left, 780 Juliet, thank you.
5 X-ray Foxtrot Romeo Kilo. Altimeter 29906 north departure approved. Clear for takeoff runway tree 4 right.
Cleared for takeoff, runway tree 4 right. Foxtrot, Romeo Kilo.
My 6180 tower, runway 27 left, line of point.
27 left, line of point, 180.
In the early 1930s, air travel was still in its infancy. Flights were slow, noisy, and uncomfortable, something only the wealthy could afford. Airlines were struggling, often operating at a loss, while passengers still trusted trains for long journeys. Then came a design that would change everything. In 1935, the Douglas Aircraft Company introduced the DC-3, an airplane that set a new standard for commercial aviation. Before the DC-3, most airlines relied on mail contracts to stay in business. Passenger revenue alone could not cover operating costs. Flights required multiple stops, and overnight travel was rare. Also during this era, aviation saw a complete transformation of commercial air transport with the introduction of the Boeing Model 247. At last, the majestic but lumbering Curtiss T-32 Condor biplane, the Fokker F-7, and Ford trimotors were giving way to the sleek, all-metal airliners. But something even greater would follow. It was the Douglas DC-3. Hardly had the Model 247 gotten off the ground when it was eclipsed by the Douglas airliner. And who would have thought that DC-3 would still be in service more than 80 years after it was first introduced, while the Model 247 is only a distant memory. DC stands for Douglas Commercial. The DC-3 was the culmination of a development effort that began after an inquiry from Transcontinental and Western Airlines, TWA, to Donald Douglas. After the crash of a TWA Fokker F-10A on March 31, 1931, on which the famous football coach Newt Rotten passed, the Bureau of Air Commerce required all operators of wooden spar and rib aircraft to perform periodic internal safety inspections of their aircraft. Due to the cost and lengthy time for the inspections, TWA needed to update its fleet. It wanted to purchase the Boeing Model 247. However, TWA's rival in transcontinental air service, United Airlines, was starting service with the Boeing 247, and Boeing refused to sell any 247s to other airlines until United's order for 60 aircraft had been filled. This gave a huge margin advantage to United, and TWA couldn't afford to wait. As a consequence, TWA approached the manufacturers. Consolidated, Curtiss, General Aviation, Martin, and Douglas for a similar design. TWA's requirements were as follows: all-metal, tri-motor monoplane powered by 500 to 550 horsepower supercharged engines, a crew of 2 and at least 12 passengers, a range of 1,080 miles, a cruising speed of 150 miles per hour, a top speed of 185 miles per hour, a landing speed not to exceed 65 miles per hour, a rate of climb 1,200 feet per minute, a service ceiling of 21,000 feet, and a maximum gross weight of 14,200 pounds. The most stringent requirement was that the airplane had to maintain control during takeoff on a single engine at any airport in its network. Considering that one of TWA stations was located at Albuquerque, New Mexico, which has an elevation of 4,954 feet, or 1,510 meters, and temperatures that often exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius, this was no small detail. After weeks of technical negotiations, a contract was finally offered to Douglas. Rather than building a tri-motor, they convinced TWA that 2 710 horsepower Wright Cyclone engines would meet their requirements. Also included in the design were Narca cowlings, landing gear that would retract into the engine nacelles, and a multi-spar wing, inspired by Jack Northrop, that would give the airplane exceptional strength with a long fatigue-free life. The result was the DC-1 Douglas Commercial Model No. 1, which in many ways a more refined aircraft than the Model 247. It was larger, faster, and carried 12 passengers. The Model 247 only held 10 passengers. Also, the mid-wing section was integral to the fuselage, which eliminated the spar running through the cabin as it did on the 247. TWA agreed to pay $125,000 towards the cost for the DC-1, and Douglas paid the balance for design and engineering. The total cost for development was $307,000. Its inaugural flight was on July 1, 1933, but it was nearly the last, when both engines quit during the climb out. Chief Test Pilot Carl A. Cover and co-pilot Fred Herman were able to maintain control as the plane nosed over. When unexpectedly, both engines started working again. They resumed climbing and the engines quit again. This happened several times until they were able to gain enough altitude and nurse the airplane back to the airport. As it turned out, the fuel lines were located at the rear of the carburetor, and the carburetor floats were also hinged at the rear. Since the fuel was gravity-fed and there was no pressure fuel system, the fuel lines emptied and starved the engines of fuel during climb. The problem was corrected by reversing the carburetor floats and fuel lines. After the fuel system was rectified, the DC-1 was put through extensive testing. On one flight, it was loaded to 18,000 pounds, using sandbags and lead ingots to simulate full fuel, passengers, crew, and mail. It climbed above 22,000 feet, far above the TWA requirement. With a full load, the airplane could take off in less than 1,000 feet, and with full flaps, it could land at less than 65 miles per hour, as required. On one high-speed run, it achieved a maximum speed of 227 miles per hour. There was only one more test that had to be completed, and that was for the airplane to take off and land on one engine with a full load. On September 4, 1933, a test flight was performed from Winslow, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico. During the takeoff run, one of the engines had been shut down and the DC-1 climbed slowly from 4,500 feet to its cruising altitude of 8,000 feet. It flew the 280-mile route successfully, thus completing all of the TWA's requirements. Based on the results of the performance tests, TWA placed an immediate order for 25 Douglas airliners, but with more refinements as the DC-2. The DC-2 was increased in size with a wider diameter fuselage to allow for the taller passengers to stand in the cabin. Its length was increased by 2 feet to allow for an extra row of seats that increased total seating to 14. There were other improvements as well. The payload was increased, the service ceiling was increased, the speed was increased, and even in-flight movies were introduced. The DC-2 was now the most luxurious airliner in the world. Only 4 months after the Model 247 entered service, the first DC-2 was handed over to TWA. It flew in record time between Los Angeles and New York. TWA advertised coast-to-coast service in a 200 miles per hour luxury airliner called the Sky Chief. Transcontinental flights consisted of 4 legs from New York, Newark, to Chicago, Kansas City, Albuquerque, and Los Angeles. Flights left at 4 p.m. and arrived at 7 a.m. the next day. The Douglas DC-2 production model began operations in July 1934, and after its introduction, it became the best passenger aircraft in the world, and other operators soon began queuing up to place orders. Douglas was not about to make the same mistake that Boeing made by withholding Model 247 orders from other customers. The first of the non-US airline customers was KLM, which began flying the type in the autumn of the same year, and the DC-2 was set up for a long production run. This concludes part 1 of the commentary on the history of this legendary aircraft. Hope you enjoyed it during the cruise. In the next video, we will commence our exciting journey to Goose Bay Airport and continue part 2 of this commentary. For now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the landing into Montreal Airport, which includes cinematic shots for both landing and taxi phases. See you in part 2.